are one of the greatest examples I can think of the principle of mediated design. Of course, Darwin talks about natural selection, and there's a sense in which natural selection, of course, is true. Animals adapt to their environment. But the lizard is an example of not an animal mutating and gaining new information, but of the fact that when God designed these original lizard kind, he gave them the potential to adapt to all sorts of different environments. And in this particular case, these animals are singular. They swim in the water. They live in the water. They swim underneath the water. They can hold their breath for long periods of time underneath the water. They're the only lizards in the entire world that can do just that, only found here in the Galapagos. And they fit perfectly with the environment. And so we call this mediative design, that there was an original design, but then all the potential. Evolution of species means that animals actually gain new information and benefit from positive mutations. But it's abundantly clear, in the case of the cormorant, that the exact opposite has happened. These birds have experienced a loss of information.
As the result of natural selection, species are able to change and to adapt to their environment. Those animals most suited to their environments, something Darwin called favored races, thrive and produce offspring. Animals less suitable tend to die off, a process leading to changes in diversification.
But then Darwin takes a great leap of faith. From so simple a beginning, endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved. Darwin concludes that small changes within a kind, something we can observe, are proof of something which has never been observed, evolution, or the transformation of one kind of animal into another. This presents a huge question.
But imagine the surprise when these marine iguanas were seen to be interfertile with the land-based iguanas. Evolution is all about the origin of new species, but in this case, those that we thought were different species are really the same species. It's the opposite of evolution.
Evolution would say natural selection, which is, the dominant survive and evolve, leads to new information that creates new species. A creationist would say that natural selection is because of the information that's already there that allows for potential.
The Bible begins with discussions on taxonomy and on kinds. So taxonomy is how we name and classify animals, giving them names, and the kinds are the original created orders. Okay, well, when God created these original kinds, whatever the original penguin kind was, whatever the original bear kind was, he built into them an amazing sequence of information which is found in their genetic code that does allow them to adapt to different circumstances and to emphasize different traits and different characteristics based on a number of different factors. Now, if this is what's meant by natural selection, then we are 100% behind it. That's not what Darwin means. That's not what people are being led to believe today. What they're being led to believe is that natural selection is a survival of the fittest that leads to certain animals being taken out while other animals are getting stronger and better by gaining new information and transforming into brand new kinds of animals. We've never seen it. It's never been recorded. It certainly hasn't been recorded at the Galapagos. It's contrary to the biblical understanding of science and the scientific understanding of science. That's what we oppose. We don't oppose the idea that animals change. We do oppose the idea that they change into new kinds of animals.
Evolution, you remember, talks about these big changes. It doesn't just talk about an ape becoming a man. That's a big change, but it's not such a, it's not as big a change as a clam turning into a man, and so in evolution, a fish, has become a person, and the fish, of course, came from an invertebrate and on down, so these big changes. It was in the 50s that some creation biologists began to think biblically and recognize that in the Bible says that God created things after their kind. It says it 10 times in Genesis chapter 1. 10 times, count them, 10 times. If God says something once, that's important, but if he says it 10 times in 20 verses, there's an emphasis there. And God was saying that he created things after their kind. Well, what's a kind? A kind is a grouping of, like dogs, the dog kind. Well, it doesn't mean he created beagles and cocker spaniels and poodles. It means dogs. And there's a lot of room to vary in a kind. And even we call them different species now. But that kind has limits. There's a lot of dogs, and there's a lot of cats. The dogs and cats are of a different kind, and there's no mixing, and there's no evidence that there ever was an in-between between them. I mean, they just are separate. That's exactly what the Bible says. And once creationists and once Christians got that understanding of that God created after their kind all these different animals, then that's allowed the creation movement to get started and to blossom as it has.
Even at the microscopic level, the same principle is manifest. Pierre-Paul Grasset made a similar observation speaking to the study done with bacteria over several decades. What is the use of their unceasing mutation if they do not change? In sum, the mutation of bacteria and viruses are merely hereditary fluctuations around a median position, a swing to the right, a swing to the left, but no final evolutionary effect.
In the unique designs of the marine iguana, the flightless cormorant, and the rapidly diversifying finch population, we see natural selection, not as proof of evolution, but as proof of the wisdom of the Creator and the majestic complexity of His design, a design that enables each kind of animal to adapt and thrive.
But how exactly does this bird get the blue feet it's named after? How are any new traits passed on from one generation to another? It's a big issue, because without an answer to this question, there is no mechanism to support a theory of evolution. Like his grandfather Erasmus before him, Darwin supported a form of Lamarckism, a theory of hereditability developed by French biologist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. It proposed that individual traits are passed through use and disuse. Why do giraffes have long necks? Lamarckians argued that when one giraffe stretched the size of its neck trying to find new food, it would develop a stronger and longer neck. That giraffe would have a baby giraffe, and the babies would then have stronger and longer necks. Today, this theory, an essential building block for Darwin's model of evolution, has been discredited. National Geographic magazine says that modern genetics turns the spotlight on his biggest mistakes. Darwin's own ideas on the mechanism of inheritance were a mess and wrong. Darwin's error was powerfully illustrated through the groundbreaking discovery of DNA. He knew life was complex, but he had no idea just how complex it was. DNA is a nucleic acid that houses genetic instructions, or blueprints. These blueprints are accessed during the growth and development of all known living things. It's what gives us our eye and hair color, our features. Everything about us is written in code, complex code. The human body contains about 2 tablespoons of DNA, and each DNA molecule is about 6 feet long, and it has been estimated that there is an incredibly complex code, more complex than any supercomputer on Earth. Yet this question persists. How could this massive amount of precise and detailed information contained in DNA come about by random chance and natural processes?